Welcome to lecture number 3 for LL536, Language in the Media. This lecture is on the subject of register and style. And this is the first of 3 within this series. So, register and style, what are they? And what theories can we use to begin to unpick how register and style affect the communication that we have in the media and how we can see the different varieties of language in the media. So let's start with some definitions. What is register? So we can see there from Durrant and Lambrou, their book Language and Media. On page 8, they say that register is a variety of language which is distinctive for a specific context. And we'll see throughout the whole of this term and this module that context is really crucial to language in the media. We need to know what the context is so that we can begin to understand the message that's being communicated. So Durrant and Lambrou suggest that register is made up of these different aspects. So vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, layout, and sometimes other features of text design. So this might be more than just simply where the text has been put, because that would be layout. It might also include things like font size, type, colour, and also, particularly with multimodal pieces, it might also include the types of images that appear alongside the text. And of course, this is for looking at text, but register can also and does also affect spoken types of communication, and we'll see some of that as we go through. And you may have already watched some of the recommended videos, and you'll have a bit of an idea then about how register can really affect things if it doesn't match with the context. Okay, so looking at one particular type of register, this is a legal register, and this is from Hansard, which is the book where everything that has been said during the proceedings of our Houses of Parliament, everything is put down in this. And we may nowadays have the opportunity to be able to watch parts of the Houses of Commons and the House of Lords being filmed, particularly things like Prime Minister's Question Time, and that gets televised and, allows us, the general public, to actually have a greater idea about the proceedings of our government process. But before the arrival of television, and for a considerably long time, hundreds of years, Hansard has been publishing all of the events and recording exactly what was said, who said it, when, and so on. So this is written in a legal register because that's the type of register that is commonly used within government. And of course that's partly because government is concerned with making new laws. So we can see from this, we've got at the very top there, this is the House of Commons, and we've got the date and the time. And then once the House met, there were prayers first. We have Mr. Speaker in the chair, which there is laid out almost like a play and a sort of direction for the players, if you like, the actors. But it gives us context about who is there. And then we have this business before questions. So this is before questions start. And then we have all of the details, and we can see who it is that said things, and then, what went on further. And this is written in a very formal style because a legal register is just that, extremely formal. So we also have a relatively formal style as well with a medical register. And this is extremely similar to an academic register. And in fact, this is a journal article, and this is a medical journal article. So the Lancet, of course, being a very famous British medical journal. But if we were to read any academic journal, and I'm sure you're already familiar with some of them from your studies, you will be familiar with this type of layout and this type of writing and register. So we've got complex terminology being used, and we also have this specific layout which explains who are the people involved that wrote this, when it was published, how we can access it, and we've got a web address there. And then, of course, because this is available online, we also have all of the social media buttons on the right hand side there. So, you know, if we were going to go and have a look at this in a published hard copy version, we wouldn't see all of the social media buttons, of course. And we wouldn't have the different tabs along the top there. Instead, those would be laid out one after the other. We might also have a ceremonial register, and this, as you can see, is for the Queen's speech. But the type of ceremonial register that we might be more familiar with would perhaps be for things like weddings, funerals, also things like citizenship ceremonies, and as you'll all hopefully go through, the degree ceremony that will happen once you've done your final year exams and hopefully passed them all. So that again is a sort of a special type of register that's used in a ceremony, and it's something that we are very familiar with. We could also say that that ceremonial register is also used in things like religious services. So whether it's, and this is particularly, I suppose, from the point of view of British English sort of Christianity. So we might look at how the various different services are carried out in the Anglican Church and also the Roman Catholic Church. But, you know, though that ceremonial register also extends, of course, to other faiths that have the very sort of similar types of ceremonies. So whether it's Islam or Judaism, there will be certain things that are said. Prayers are part of that ceremonial register. You know, it's something that everybody gets to know these often quite poetic words in the case of religions, but you know, it's all part of that ceremonial register. And they're things that we're, as I say, we're quite familiar with. So this is obviously laid out on a page because this is again taken from what appeared online about the Queen's speech in 2017. But we can see there from the transcript exactly what the Queen said. And she was, of course, reading from a printed script that had been prepared for her by the Prime Minister's office. We might be more familiar with the informal register of popular news. So this has come from a news outlet online, and we have there a coloured image, a photograph, and we've then got that headline which says king-sized problem. So that phrase at the beginning, the two words king-sized, is a play on words. And if we look at the text underneath the image, that's explained. So we have 300,000 flights cancelled and 110,000 to be flown back to UK after Monarch goes bust. Also, here's what you need to know if you're booked to fly with Monarch. So Monarch was an airline company that went bust. And we've got that semantic field of king, monarch, ruler, everything to do with royalty. I imagine probably had in the rest of the story being that play on words, but particularly there's this play on words with it saying king-sized problem, and normally we're used to seeing that sort of phrase of king-sized being reserved for things like king-sized beds, for example, or maybe not so much now, but when smoking was widespread, king sized was a particular size of cigarette. And of course, it implies something huge and luxurious. But here, king sized problem just reflects that this is a particularly large problem, and it's a large problem for this company called Monarch. So that's something that we might be quite familiar with popular news, is that it's quite common for them to use play on words and to use a sort of quite selective semantic field, which will help us to understand the story more, and might even have some elements of, sort of particularly with the headline, some elements of clickbait in it, to make us go and have a look at what it is they're saying. And some newspapers, some media outlets are particularly renowned for having an awful lot of wordplay going on in their headlines. The Sun newspaper in particular does this, and you can guarantee that every single summer, whenever we have some hot days, the Sun newspaper always has headlines on the front page with things like "Phew, what a scorcher," or something similar to that. And likewise, if it gets very cold, the weather is one that they are very commonly use weather to have some sort of play on words with. Oh, and also before we move on as well, another feature of that informal register is that in the blue text at the bottom, we've got that contraction. Instead of "here is what you need to know," it's "here's." And also the fact that we, the reader, are being directly addressed. Here's what you need to know if you are booked. So it's very much more informal, in that the writer is actually addressing us, the reader. And, that is absolutely done to make us feel that intimacy and that informality when we are addressed with that second person usage of you. And that's something that we see across lots of different texts. So it's not just news that we see that with. We don't see it very much in novels, for example, but we do see it in things like video games. And, it's very, very common to see in video games and online texts where we, the reader, are directly addressed. So if we look at the BBC News, we have here not so much in the way of a play on words with the headlines, and that's something that we could perhaps say that the not less popular, because the BBC is still very popular, but perhaps the more sort of respected, and I say that in inverted commas as well, because the BBC has received quite a lot of criticism over the last 6 months to the last year over the way that they have handled the reporting of our current government. So the BBC is perhaps not as respected as they used to be, but they are regarded as part of what we might call the quality press. So the quality press includes things like the BBC, to a lesser extent, but still up there, would be also Sky News. Certainly Channel 4 News is regarded as part of the quality press. And that phrase, quality press, really started and can be found more closely at home in amongst print media. So the quality press used to be called broadsheets, and that referred to the size of the paper that the news was actually printed on. So those very, very large newspapers, which used to be the Daily Telegraph, the Guardian, the Observer, and when it used to have a print version, also the Independent. So they were print, oh, and the Times as well. They used to all be printed on large format paper. That's no longer the case for, I think, all of those newspapers apart from the Telegraph. I believe the Telegraph is still printed on large format. The Observer, which is the Guardian at the weekend, comes out on a Sunday. That's printed on large format paper, but the Guardian and the Times have gone to a smaller size, a tabloid size, and that's what the more popular press used to be called. It used to be called tabloid, and that would include things like the Daily Mail, the Express, the Sun, the News of the World when it used to exist, the People, the Mirror, and all of those, as I say, tabloid-sized newspapers. Now we have a further separate group. So yes, we have tabloid, but it's more commonly called popular press. But we also have those newspapers that are more full of sort of celebrity stories and scandals and quizzes, and a more sort of almost heading towards magazine type outputs, and they tend to be called red tops. So the red tops are those that are full of, as I say, scandal. So that's the Sun, certainly, the Sun, the Mirror, and things like the Sunday Sport, but the Sun and the Mirror in particular, they're red tops. And that is a description, because their title, the name of the newspaper, tends to be in red along the top of the paper. Anyway, let's get back to this slide. So BBC News, and this is from their website. So, and we can tell this is from the website because we have, again, all of those social media buttons, so we can actually share this story. And of course, that's what is really spreading the news across the globe, is that we can actually share it very easily because we have social media. And this is a new development that has only really been possible over the last decade or so. So we also have when this story came out, and it just says 34 minutes ago. Of course, this is, an old screen grab. So Hammond acknowledges business fears over Brexit uncertainty. And we have there a picture of Philip Hammond, who was the Chancellor at the time. And, we've got the BBC logo behind him, and also being sort of held up with the microphone, and we then have the story underneath. So the BBC is extremely useful in how it lays out their stories, because they always put what's called the lead into bold. So the headline is the larger text at the top: Hammond acknowledges business fears over Brexit uncertainty. The lead, which is often spelled in an archaic format of LEDE, that's almost part of the headline. It's the lead will be the headline and that first paragraph, that first sentence, which will sum up everything that you actually need to know. And you don't necessarily need to go and read the rest of the story. Everything is there with Hammond acknowledges business fears over Brexit uncertainty. Businesses need more clarity on Brexit, the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, has acknowledged. That's our entire story. And then, as we go down into the rest of the text, we get more of the story, but it's more detail. And news stories are always written on what's called an inverted pyramid format, which means that we have all of the important information right up at the top. And so like the broad base of a pyramid turned upside down. And then as the story goes down, as the text goes down, so everything narrows in as much as we get less detail or less importance. And as we go down right the way to the bottom, we'll find that things at the very end are not necessary really. You know, they might give us more colour, more interesting aspects, but actually it's not the crucial detail that will appear at the top.